The sun hung high in the clear blue Miami sky, beating down on the bustling community pool like a relentless force. The air was thick with the smell of chlorine and the noise of splashing water as families and children filled the pool, seeking refuge from the oppressive heat. For 16-year-old Ethan, the sound of laughter and the hum of conversations were background noise to the steady rhythm of his responsibilities as a junior lifeguard. Ethan's life was far from easy. Raised by his single mother, Laura, who worked tirelessly to make ends meet, Ethan had always known the value of hard work. Laura worked multiple jobs just to keep their small apartment from slipping into chaos. There were nights when Ethan would lie in bed, hearing his mother's footsteps as she returned home after a long day at the diner, or from the late-night shifts at the convenience store. He would often hear her sigh as she tried to unwind, but instead of complaints, Ethan only heard stories of perseverance and sacrifice. The weight of their situation was something Ethan never ignored. The sacrifices Laura made were constant, and one of the most painful was her own hunger. Ethan knew how she skipped meals so that he could eat. It wasn't something they talked about directly, but Ethan noticed the faint shadows beneath his mother's eyes. He would hear her tell him not to worry about it, but the guilt gnawed at him. And yet, despite everything, Ethan was determined to give her a better life, one where they didn't have to live paycheck to paycheck. At the pool, Ethan found a sense of purpose. His job as a junior lifeguard wasn't glamorous, but it was important. Though he was too young to perform full rescues, his lifeguard uniform, a bright red shirt and whistle, gave him a sense of authority and responsibility. Each day, he kept a sharp eye on the pool's edge, watching for any signs of trouble, all while balancing schoolwork and dreams of a better future for both himself and his mom. On one particularly busy afternoon, the pool was packed. Children raced through the water, diving and splashing in every direction. Ethan's gaze moved constantly from one corner of the pool to another, his eyes scanning for any potential risks. He was aware of the lifeguards stationed at each section of the pool, but his sharp attention made him feel like he was on high alert, constantly ready for something to go wrong. And then he saw her. Ava, a 3-year-old girl, tottered on the edge of the pool, her little feet slipping dangerously close to the water. Her babysitter, a young woman, sat a few feet away, her attention absorbed by her phone, oblivious to the danger nearby. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had seen this scenario play out in training, an inattentive adult and a child who could slip into the water unnoticed. Every instinct in him screamed to act, but he knew better than to rush over in a panic. He needed to stay calm and alert. Ethan watched carefully, his breath held as Ava took another wobbly step toward the water. The moment stretched on, each second passing like an eternity. Then, without warning, Ava lost her balance and plummeted into the deep end of the pool. Her body vanished beneath the surface, and for a split second, Ethan felt the rush of terror that came with knowing someone was in danger. The noise of the pool, splashing, laughing, the hum of conversations, was deafening, but all Ethan could hear was the quiet rush of panic in his chest. His legs sprang into action before his mind could process fully. He didn't hesitate, didn't wait for someone else to step in. Ethan sprinted towards the pool's edge, his feet pounding against the concrete as he dove into the water. He plunged into the cold, murky depths, his arms cutting through the water in powerful strokes. The sound of water crashing in his ears, the weight of Ava's small body as it floated farther from him, made his heart race. His fingers brushed against her, and in that moment, he knew he had to get her to safety. Every second was vital. Gripping Ava gently but firmly, he kicked his legs to propel them toward the shallow end, his thoughts focused on nothing but reaching the surface. When they finally broke through, Ethan's chest heaved, and he gasped for air, pushing Ava up toward the pool's edge. The crowd seemed to blur around him as he carefully pulled the girl out of the water, his hands shaking but steady. His supervisor, Nate, was already there, rushing to perform CPR on the lifeless child. Ethan watched, his heart lodged in his throat, as the seconds seemed to stretch out endlessly. The lifeguard supervisor worked quickly, pressing down on Ava's chest, trying to revive her. Then a small sputter, followed by a sharp cry. The sound broke through the silence, and Ava's tiny body convulsed as she coughed up water, her eyes wide with confusion and fear. The crowd, who had been watching in stunned silence, erupted into relieved applause. Ethan's heart slowed as he saw Ava's face twist into a frightened cry, but it was a cry of life. The relief he felt washed over him in a way he couldn't explain, but it didn't erase the weight of what had just happened. He knew that the situation could have turned out much worse. If he hadn't been watching, if he hadn't acted so quickly, things might have been different. As he watched Ava's father, a man who had arrived after the emergency had been handled, rush to his daughter's side, Ethan felt a strange sense of connection to the moment. His actions had saved her life, and in some small way, they had just prevented a family from experiencing an unimaginable tragedy. Later, as Ethan sat quietly on the edge of the pool, his mind replaying every moment in vivid detail, he couldn't help but feel that something had changed. Not just for Ava, but for him. The course of his life, of his future, felt different somehow. And little did he know, this day would be the catalyst for a series of events that would change not just his life, but his mother's as well. The day had started like any other. But now, Ethan was about to find out that even the smallest act of bravery could lead to the most extraordinary opportunities. The poolside had quieted after the ordeal, but the noise in Ethan's head was deafening. He stood at the edge of the water, his legs still trembling from the adrenaline rush of his rescue. His heart beat in uneven rhythms, the weight of what had just happened pressing down on him. The child, Ava, had nearly drowned. If he hadn't seen her, if he hadn't acted when he did, the outcome might have been catastrophic. He couldn't shake the image of her small, weight, lifeless body sinking beneath the surface. It made him feel sick, even as the relief of her cry reverberated in his chest. His supervisor, Nate, continued to reassure the now conscious Ava and her father, James Carter, who had arrived at the poolside just moments after the rescue. Ethan could hear snippets of conversation in the background. Nate was telling Mr. Carter that Ava was going to be fine, and the doctor would give her a clean bill of health. But James Carter didn't seem to hear much of it. His eyes were locked onto Ethan, who stood frozen by the pool's edge, still processing the enormity of what had just happened. Ethan couldn't meet Mr. Carter's gaze. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the quiet intensity in the man's expression, or the strange feeling that he was now somehow connected to this wealthy stranger. Ethan had never interacted with someone like Mr. Carter. Most people he knew, including his mom, were hard-working folks trying to survive from one day to the next. But Mr. Carter was different. He was someone who had everything, a self-made millionaire. Ethan couldn't fathom the kind of life this man led. After a few moments, Mr. Carter walked toward him, his eyes still glued to Ethan with a strange intensity. There was something in his gaze, something thoughtful, something that made Ethan feel both uncomfortable and strangely important at the same time. "You saved my daughter's life," Mr. Carter said, his voice deep and calm, though there was an unmistakable tremor of emotion behind his words. "I can't express how grateful I am for what you did today." Ethan shuffled awkwardly on his feet, his gaze dropping to the ground. He didn't know how to respond. He had been trained to stay calm and act in emergencies, but that wasn't the kind of thing you usually got thanked for, especially not in such a personal way. All he could think about was the seconds that felt like hours, the images of Ava's tiny body sinking, and the way his heart had leaped into his throat. It's nothing, really," Ethan muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's part of the job, Mr. Carter. I'm just doing what I'm trained for." James Carter smiled, but it was a different kind of smile than Ethan was used to seeing. There was no condescension, no pity. Instead, it was a smile that conveyed admiration. Genuine, undiluted admiration. It was a smile that made Ethan feel for the first time in a long while that maybe he was worth more than he had ever realized. "You don't understand," James said, stepping closer and lowering his voice. "What you did today was more than just your job. You acted without hesitation, without fear. You took responsibility when most people would have frozen. That takes courage. That's something very special." Ethan shifted uncomfortably, unsure of what to say next. He didn't need the praise. He didn't want it. He had done what anyone would have done in his position, right? But Mr. Carter wasn't done. "I want to help you, Ethan," James continued, his voice firm, but there was a hint of warmth. "You've shown me something important today. You've shown me that you're someone who can be relied upon, who takes responsibility in the face of danger. I'm a man who's used to seeing people for what they really are, and I can tell you're special." Ethan felt the heat rise to his face. He wasn't used to hearing such things, not from someone like James Carter. He looked over at Nate, hoping to find some guidance, but Nate was busy with the medical staff who had arrived to check on Ava. Ethan realized, in that moment, that he was on his own. "I'm just doing my job," Ethan repeated, but this time there was a little more uncertainty in his voice. Was this really just a job for him, or had he done something more? James nodded, his eyes scanning Ethan with a thoughtful expression. "I understand that, but I think you deserve more than just a summer job, Ethan. You've got potential, and I think I can offer you an opportunity to grow." Ethan blinked, not sure he understood. "What kind of opportunity?" James paused for a moment, clearly weighing his words. "I'm not offering you some charity. I'm offering you a chance to learn, to develop, and to create something for yourself. I'm sure you have dreams, aspirations. Why not let me help you make them a reality?" Ethan's head spun. What was he talking about? Was James offering him a job? Or something else? The idea seemed absurd. How could someone like James Carter, a wealthy businessman, want to help someone like him, a high school student working at a community pool? Before he could respond, James placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "You don't need to answer me now. But think about it. If you ever want to do more than Lifeguard, if you want a real chance at something bigger, come see me." With that, James turned to check on Ava, who was now sitting on a nearby lounge chair, wrapped in a towel, her big eyes wide with curiosity. Ethan watched him for a moment before glancing back down at the pool. The sound of laughter and splashing water seemed far away now, as though the world had shifted around him. That evening, as the sun began to set and the pool cleared out, Ethan found himself alone with his thoughts. What had just happened? He had saved a life? Yes, but was that all there was to it? Did that moment really matter in the grand scheme of things? Was this the turning point James had spoken about? Ethan didn't know, but something deep inside him told him this encounter, this moment, wasn't just another random event. It was the start of something bigger. As he walked back to the locker room to grab his bag, Ethan couldn't help but wonder what lay ahead for him. Would he take James up on his offer? And what would it mean for his mom, for their life? The uncertainty hung in the air, but deep down, Ethan knew one thing for sure. His life had just changed. The following hours blurred together as Ethan tried to shake off the events of the day. His thoughts raced, replaying the moments when Ava had slipped into the pool, the rush of panic, the coldness of the water as he dove in after her, and the overwhelming relief when he pulled her out of danger. The day had started like any other, but now it felt like he had crossed an invisible line, like his life had just shifted, but he couldn't yet see where it was headed. It wasn't until much later, after the crowd had dissipated and the pool had returned to its usual quiet rhythm, that Ethan finally had a chance to step back and catch his breath. He had finished his shift and was starting to gather his things when he noticed a sleek black car pull up to the entrance of the pool. It was the kind of car that stood out, even in the bustling, everyday scene of Miami's community pools. The engine cut off, and out stepped a tall man in a well-tailored suit, his face obscured by dark sunglasses. Ethan's stomach tightened with a sense of unease. The man looked familiar, and it didn't take long for Ethan to recognize him. James Carter. He had been too absorbed in the commotion earlier to register the man's presence, but now, seeing him again, Ethan felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. The billionaire entrepreneur, Ava's father, was here, and Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something important was about to happen. Mr. Carter scanned the pool area, his sharp eyes sweeping over the empty lounge chairs and the few remaining stragglers packing up for the day. His gaze landed on Ethan, and without missing a beat, he made his way over, a purposeful stride in his step. Ethan froze, uncertain of what was coming next. He quickly brushed his damp hair out of his face, trying to steady his nerves. This wasn't just a thank you anymore. There was something more to this encounter, something that had yet to reveal itself. "Ethan," James called, his voice strong but not without a trace of warmth. "I wanted to speak with you for a moment." Ethan swallowed, still caught off guard by the man's presence. "Mr. Carter," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. James's smile was genuine, but tinged with something else, appreciation, maybe even a hint of curiosity. He glanced at the pool, the scene of the earlier drama, now calm and still. I came by earlier, but I didn't have a chance to properly thank you. You've done something remarkable today. Not many people would act the way you did. Ethan shifted his weight uneasily, suddenly feeling out of place. He had done what anyone would do, hadn't he? It wasn't like he had saved the world or anything. Just a little girl, a life. He shook his head, trying to downplay it. I just did my job, sir. Really, it's nothing. But James Carter's eyes didn't let him off that easily. No, he said firmly, his tone leaving little room for argument. You acted in a way that goes beyond duty. You did what was right without hesitation, and that's something that's worth more than just a simple thank you. His expression softened. I want you to understand that. People don't always do what's right when it counts. You did. Ethan felt a heat rising in his chest, not from embarrassment, but from something else, something unfamiliar. His gut told him that James wasn't just flattering him. There was sincerity in his voice, a depth of respect that Ethan wasn't used to receiving. He was used to hearing empty compliments, but this felt different somehow. I'm not sure I deserve all this praise, Ethan said, his eyes glancing at the ground. I don't know. I just did what I thought was right. His words felt hollow to him now, even as he spoke them. He could hear the self-doubt creeping in, despite everything that had happened. Was it really so extraordinary? Was he really worthy of all this attention? James took a step closer, his expression thoughtful. Maybe not everyone would have done the same thing, Ethan, and maybe that's why I think you're someone special. Ethan looked up, startled by the intensity in Mr. Carter's eyes. This was not a man who handed out compliments lightly, especially not to a teenager who worked as a lifeguard in a community pool. It was beginning to dawn on Ethan that this conversation was going somewhere important. I'd like to offer you something. James continued, his tone measured but sincere. A chance to do more than just lifeguard. A chance to learn and grow, to explore your potential in ways that aren't available here. You showed me something today. A drive, a sense of responsibility. That's rare, Ethan. I want to help you nurture that. I want to offer you a chance to see the world differently, to learn what it takes to succeed. Ethan blinked, trying to process the words, but they didn't quite make sense. What do you mean? You want to? Help me? James nodded. I do. I run several companies, and I see potential in people all the time, but not like this. You have something in you. I'd like to offer you a paid internship with one of my companies. I think you could learn a lot, gain experience, and maybe even find a future you never considered. Ethan felt the world stop. His mind raced, trying to grasp what James was saying. A paid internship? With one of his companies? Ethan couldn't believe it. This wasn't just an offer for some entry-level job. This was a chance to step into a world of opportunity, something he had never imagined for himself. His first instinct was to question it. He wasn't qualified. He was just a kid, a lifeguard, a teenager with no real future beyond high school. But James was offering him a lifeline, an escape from the cycle of struggle he had known all his life. I don't know what to say, Ethan stammered, his heart pounding in his chest. You don't need to decide now, James said, his voice steady and reassuring. But I want you to think about it. It's a chance to change your life, Ethan, and it's up to you whether you take it or not. But I believe in you. Ethan stood there, frozen. The noise of the world around him seemed to fade away as he absorbed the weight of what had just been said. It wasn't just an internship. It was a doorway to something bigger, something better than what he had ever dreamed. I'll think about it, Ethan finally said, his voice thick with emotion. He didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like it might be possible to change his own destiny. James clapped him gently on the back. That's all I ask. Take your time. I'll be here if you have any questions. Don't hesitate to reach out. As James turned to leave, Ethan watched him walk away, his mind swirling with possibilities. What was he supposed to do? Could he really take a chance like this? Was he ready to step into a world so far beyond anything he had ever known? As the evening sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the pool deck, Ethan knew one thing for sure. His life had just taken an unexpected turn. and no matter what decision he made, things would never be the same again. The days following Mr. Carter's offer were a blur of uncertainty for Ethan. His life, once so straightforward, now felt like a puzzle with pieces that didn't quite fit together. He couldn't stop thinking about the internship James had proposed, the opportunity that seemed too good to be true. But how could he take it? He was just a 16-year-old kid from a modest background. He had no experience, no skills beyond his lifeguarding duties, and no understanding of what a business internship even entailed. Could someone like him really fit into the world James Carter was offering? But at the same time, the thought of what this opportunity could mean was intoxicating. A paid internship with one of the most successful entrepreneurs in Miami? A chance to escape the struggles of his family's life, to break free from the endless cycle of living paycheck to paycheck? The temptation was undeniable. For the first time in his life, Ethan allowed himself to dream, not about some far-off fantasy, but about a future that could be real. As the days passed, Ethan wrestled with his doubts and hopes. He tried to talk it over with his mother, Laura, who, as usual, was too busy juggling her multiple jobs to sit down and truly listen. Still, Ethan knew she would support whatever decision he made. She had always put him first, sacrificing everything for his well-being. Now, it was his turn to think about what was best for her, too. That evening, after another long shift at the pool, Ethan found himself sitting alone on the balcony of their small apartment, gazing out over the busy streets of Miami. The city, bathed in the warm glow of streetlights, felt alive with possibility. But Ethan wasn't sure which path he should take. Should he pursue the internship with James and risk stepping into a world he didn't understand? Or should he stay grounded, continuing the life he knew, working hard to make ends meet and taking care of his mom? The decision wasn't easy, but Ethan knew deep down that this was a turning point. He could feel it in his bones. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about his mom, too. She had worked so hard to give him a better life, had given up so much for him to have the opportunity to succeed. And now, he had the chance to help her, if he was brave enough to take it. The next morning, as the sun streamed through the window, Ethan woke with a sense of clarity. He had made up his mind. He was going to take James up on his offer, not for himself, but for his mother. This was his chance to help her find stability, to give her the life she had always deserved. Ethan's fingers trembled as he dialed the number Mr. Carter had given him. The phone rang twice before James picked up. "Ethan, I was wondering when I'd hear from you," James said, his voice warm and welcoming. "I've thought about your offer," Ethan began, his heart racing. "And I've made my decision. I'd like to take you up on the internship. But there's something else." James was quiet for a moment, the air of curiosity building. "Go on." Ethan took a deep breath, the words he had rehearsed in his mind finally spilling out. "It's not just about me, Mr. Carter. My mom, Laura, she's been struggling to find stable work. She's always putting my needs ahead of hers, and I know it's been hard for her. If you could help her find a job, something that would give her some security, it would mean the world to me." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and for a brief moment, Ethan wondered if he had said too much. He hadn't expected to make this request, but it felt right. He didn't want to just help himself. He wanted to lift his mother out of the exhaustion and hardship she had endured for so long. When James spoke again, his voice was softer, thoughtful. "Ethan, I'm impressed by your selflessness. I can see you're not just thinking about your future, but your mother's as well. I'll do everything I can to help her. I can't promise anything, but I'll make some calls. You have my word." Relief washed over Ethan as he leaned back against the railing, his mind racing with the possibilities. He had done it. He had taken the first step towards something that could change both their lives. The internship, the help for his mom, it wasn't just a dream anymore. It was within reach. The next few days felt like a whirlwind. Ethan kept his focus on his work at the pool, but his mind kept drifting back to the future. The uncertainty of it all still gnawed at him, but the sense of purpose that came with his decision was enough to keep him moving forward. Then, a week later, Ethan's mother came home with a letter in her hand, one that would change everything. Her hands shook as she opened it, and when she read the words, tears filled her eyes. "Mom, what's wrong?" Ethan asked, rushing to her side. Laura's voice was thick with emotion as she handed him the letter. "Ethan, I've been invited for an interview. It's with one of James Carter's companies." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "That's amazing. Mom, this could be it. This could be the job that changes everything for us." Laura wiped her eyes and smiled, a mixture of disbelief and hope in her expression. "I don't know what to say. You've done so much for me already. I never imagined something like this could happen." Ethan pulled her into a hug, feeling the weight of the moment. This was it, the opportunity they had both been waiting for, the chance for his mother to find the stability she had always deserved. He felt a sense of pride swell in his chest, knowing that, together, they were taking the first step toward a better future. The interview came quickly, and Laura threw herself into preparing for it. She dressed in her best clothes, despite their humble origins, and studied the company with a determination that reminded Ethan of the strength she had always shown. The night before the interview, she couldn't sleep, her mind racing with anxiety. Ethan, on the other hand, felt a strange sense of calm. He knew this could be the break they needed. The day of the interview, Ethan walked his mom to the door and kissed her cheek. "You've got this, Mom. Just be yourself. They'll see how amazing you are." Laura smiled, though her nerves were still evident. "I'll try my best, Ethan. But thank you for everything." As she walked out, Ethan felt a sense of hope he hadn't known in years. Maybe, just maybe, this was the moment that would change everything for them. The days following Laura's interview were filled with a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. Ethan kept himself busy at the pool, but his thoughts were never far from what his mother might be facing. He knew how much this job meant to her. She had spent years moving from one low-paying, thankless job to another, always just scraping by. This interview could be their ticket out of the cycle that had defined their lives for as long as Ethan could remember. Ethan's shift at the pool that day felt endless. He had never been so distracted, his mind constantly drifting to thoughts of his mom. Would she do well? Would they offer her the job? He caught himself daydreaming about the future, about what it might look like if she finally had the financial stability she deserved, about the opportunities that could open up for him if he could help her succeed. As the afternoon sun began to dip below the horizon, signaling the end of another long day, Ethan felt his stomach tighten with nerves. He hadn't heard from his mother yet. The interview had been scheduled for the morning, and he had been waiting all day for a phone call, a text, anything that might give him a clue as to how it had gone. The pool was quieter now, with the last few patrons packing up, and the air felt heavy with anticipation. At that moment, his phone buzzed in his pocket, and his heart skipped a beat. He quickly pulled it out and saw the name Mom flashing on the screen. "Hello?" he answered, his voice betraying his nervousness. "Ethan." Laura's voice crackled through the line, filled with emotion. "I got the job, honey. They offered it to me." For a moment, Ethan was speechless. A surge of emotion flooded through him, relief, joy, pride. His mother had done it. She had fought for so long, and now she had found the opportunity that would change their lives. "Mom, that's amazing. I knew you could do it," he exclaimed, his voice thick with pride. "I couldn't have done it without you, Ethan. You've been my rock," Laura replied, her voice breaking with emotion. "This is more than just a job for me. It's a fresh start, for both of us." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, taking in the enormity of what had just happened. This was the turning point they had both been waiting for. It wasn't just a paycheck that Laura had earned. It was a chance to rebuild, to move forward into a future that didn't feel so uncertain. They spoke for a few more minutes, and then Laura had to go, her voice still full of excitement, as she promised to tell him all the details when she got home. Ethan hung up the phone, unable to stop the grin spreading across his face. As he began to gather his things to leave, his supervisor, Nate, walked over, his expression curious. "You okay, kid? You look like you've just won the lottery." Ethan chuckled, still riding the high of the good news. "Better than the lottery, Nate. My mom got the job, the one with James Carter's company. It's going to change everything for us." Nate's eyes widened in surprise. "Well, would you look at that? Seems like James really came through for you, huh?" "Yeah," Ethan said, shaking his head in awe. "He really did. I didn't expect it. I didn't expect any of this." Nate clapped him on the back. "Well, congratulations, kid. You deserve it. You've been putting in the work. It's paying off. Ethan couldn't help but agree. He had worked hard, but so had his mother. This wasn't just his victory, it was theirs. And now, they both had a chance to build something new. That evening, when Laura came home, she was practically glowing with excitement. She had made sure to tell Ethan all about the interview, how she had clicked with the hiring manager, how the company seemed like a perfect fit for her skills and values. She was thrilled, and Ethan couldn't help but be swept up in her joy. They spent the night celebrating. They didn't have much, but what they had felt like enough. It was the first time in a long time that the two of them had felt like they were on the verge of something bigger. The world, once so heavy with doubt and hardship, now seemed full of promise. But even as Ethan savored the moment, he couldn't help but think about the next step, the internship. James had made it clear that he wanted Ethan to be part of his company, but the more he thought about it, the more questions filled his mind. Was he really ready to step into a corporate environment? What would it mean to work for someone like James Carter, someone who had so much power and influence? The fear of the unknown crept back in, but Ethan pushed it aside. This was his chance, just like his mom's job was hers. He had to take it. He had to step up and prove that he was worthy of the opportunity. The next morning, Ethan called James Carter again. This time, his voice was more confident, more certain of what he wanted. "Mr. Carter, it's Ethan. I've made up my mind. I want to take the internship. I'm ready to learn, and I'm ready to work hard." James's voice was filled with warmth and approval. "I'm glad to hear it, Ethan. I'll have my assistant set everything up for you. You'll be starting in a week, so make sure you're prepared. I have a feeling you're going to do great things." Ethan hung up the phone, his heart pounding. The internship was real. It wasn't just some dream or a far-off possibility. It was happening. He was going to work with James Carter's company, and this time, there was no turning back. As he hung up the phone, Ethan stood by the window of their apartment, looking out at the Miami skyline. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden glow over the city. He could see the future unfolding before him, a future he had never dared to imagine. And for the first time in his life, Ethan felt like he was ready to take it on. Everything was changing, and it was changing fast. But for once, it felt like the change was something he could control. He was no longer just a lifeguard at a community pool. He was a young man with opportunities, with a future that was beginning to shine brightly before him. And as he looked at the horizon, he knew that this was just the beginning. The first day of Ethan's internship arrived faster than he had expected. His nerves were on edge as he woke up early, the sun barely rising, casting a soft light into his small room. He was no longer just a teenage lifeguard. Today, he was stepping into a whole new world, a world filled with possibilities and challenges he had never imagined. Ethan had never worked in an office environment before. The thought of corporate lingo, stiff suits, and professional expectations made his stomach churn with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. He knew his first impression mattered. He had to prove himself. But how? As he prepared for the day, his mother was already up, bustling around the apartment in a quiet, focused way. She had been working late shifts and waking up early for years, but this new job gave her a new energy, a new light. It was a relief to see her so excited for the future after all the sacrifices she had made for him. "You sure you're ready for this?" Laura asked, her voice warm but filled with a hint of concern as she noticed the unease in Ethan's eyes. Ethan gave her a tight smile. "Yeah, Mom, I think so. It's just a lot to take in, but I'm going to give it my best shot." She smiled back, her eyes glistening with pride. "I know you will. Just remember, this is your chance. Don't let the nerves get in the way of your potential." With that, Ethan grabbed his backpack and headed out the door, making his way to the bus stop. The drive to the company's headquarters felt like an eternity. As the bus rumbled along the busy streets of Miami, Ethan couldn't stop his mind from racing. He had made the right choice to take the internship, but he couldn't shake the thought that maybe he wasn't ready for it after all. What if they saw right through him? What if they realized he wasn't cut out for this world of suits and boardrooms? Finally, the bus pulled up to the sleek glass building where James Carter's company was based. The building towered over everything around it, its polished exterior reflecting the sunlight. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. This was it. This was the place where everything could change. As he stepped inside, he was greeted by a spacious lobby, its modern design a far cry from the humble apartment he and his mother had shared. The polished floors, the shining steel sculptures, the well-dressed professionals walking in and out of the elevators, it all felt surreal. Ethan felt like an outsider, like someone who didn't belong in this world. But as soon as he mentioned his name to the receptionist, she smiled warmly and directed him to the elevator. Upstairs, Ethan was met by Samantha, a young woman in her 20s who worked as James Carter's personal assistant. She had a professional, yet friendly demeanor, and she immediately put him at ease. "Welcome to the team, Ethan. James is expecting you. I'll show you to your desk," Samantha said as she led him through the sleek, open office space. Ethan's desk was small but well organized, sitting next to a large window with a breathtaking view of the city. His heart raced as he took in the scene around him. The office was full of people moving quickly, typing away at computers, making phone calls, and collaborating in hushed tones. It was overwhelming, but Ethan was determined to make a good impression. For the first few hours, Samantha walked him through basic tasks, answering phone calls, organizing files, and assisting with various administrative duties. Ethan was careful to ask questions whenever he wasn't sure about something, eager to learn as much as he could. Though everything felt new and strange, he found himself getting into the rhythm of the workday. At lunch, Samantha took him to the company's cafeteria, where employees mingled over sandwiches and salads. Ethan still felt out of place, like he didn't belong, but he kept telling himself that this was what he had worked for. This was the chance he had been given, and he couldn't afford to waste it. "Hey, Ethan, how's it going?" A voice interrupted his thoughts. It was one of the other interns, a friendly-looking guy named Max, who had started at the company a few months earlier. "If you need someone to show you the ropes, I'm happy to help. I remember feeling totally lost when I first started here." Ethan smiled, grateful for the offer. "I appreciate it, Max. I could definitely use a few tips." They chatted for a while about the company and the people who worked there. Max shared stories about the challenges of adjusting to the fast pace of the office and the pressure of impressing James Carter. "But it's worth it, man," Max added. "James isn't easy on people, but he rewards hard work. If you keep your head down and focus, he'll notice." Ethan nodded, feeling the weight of the advice. "Thanks, Max. I'll keep that in mind." The rest of the day passed in a blur of tasks, phone calls, and emails. Ethan's mind was spinning, but he didn't mind. He was learning more in a single day than he ever had at the pool. There was something thrilling about the fast-paced environment, the sense that everything mattered. He was starting to understand why people loved working here. When the workday finally ended, Ethan felt exhausted, but also strangely satisfied. He had made it through the first day without any major mistakes. That night, as he rode the bus back home, he felt a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And that was enough. The following weeks flew by in a blur of learning and growth. Ethan began to find his rhythm at the office, becoming more comfortable with the tasks at hand. He started to contribute in meaningful ways, helping organize important files, preparing presentations for meetings, and even drafting emails for James. It wasn't easy, but with each new task, Ethan grew more confident in his abilities. James continued to mentor him, taking the time to check in and offer advice whenever Ethan needed it. The more time he spent with James, the more he saw the depth of the man's wisdom and kindness. James wasn't just a successful entrepreneur. He was someone who genuinely cared about the people around him, especially those who showed the willingness to work hard and learn. Ethan was beginning to realize that he had made the right choice. One afternoon, as Ethan was organizing a few files in the office, James came over to his desk. "How's everything going, Ethan? Are you adjusting to the workload?" James asked, his tone casual, but with a hint of concern. Ethan looked up, trying to hide the nervousness in his voice. "It's been a lot to take in, but I think I'm getting the hang of it. Thanks to your guidance." James smiled. "You're doing great. Keep up the good work. If you need anything, don't hesitate to ask." Ethan nodded, feeling a surge of pride. It wasn't just that James had noticed his efforts. It was that he had taken the time to show genuine interest in his progress. It meant more than he could express in words. Later that day, Ethan received a call from his mother. She sounded more excited than he had ever heard her voice crackling with energy. "Ethan, I just wanted to tell you something. I'm so proud of you. I know you're working so hard, and I can see how much you've grown. I have a good feeling about this job, Ethan. I think we're both going to make it." Her words filled him with warmth, and for a moment, he allowed himself to believe that everything was falling into place. The sacrifices had paid off. The hard work, the uncertainty, the fear, it was all worth it. And as he looked ahead at the future, he felt ready for whatever came next. James had believed in him, and so had his mother. He was finally starting to believe in himself too. The weeks passed in a blur of activity. Ethan's days at the office became increasingly rewarding, though they were also more demanding than anything he had experienced before. As he worked alongside the other interns and full-time employees, he learned the ropes of the corporate world: how to strategize, how to communicate effectively, how to handle pressure, and how to keep pushing forward when it felt like there was no end in sight. Though it wasn't always easy, Ethan felt himself growing. The things he once thought were impossible to master, managing spreadsheets, coordinating schedules, drafting emails for high-profile clients, were now within his reach. He wasn't just doing busy work. He was learning how to contribute meaningfully. Slowly but surely, he began to earn the respect of his colleagues, and even James seemed to be taking notice of his potential. One afternoon, as Ethan was working on a presentation for an upcoming meeting, his phone buzzed on his desk. He picked it up to see a text from his mom. "I'm so proud of you, Ethan. You're doing amazing." A smile spread across his face. His mother's words had always meant so much to him, but lately they felt even more significant. The fact that she was proud of him, even in the midst of all this change and uncertainty, kept him grounded. She had been his pillar of strength for so long, and now he was becoming hers in a way. His success was her success. But the real turning point came when James Carter himself called him into his office one afternoon, a call that left Ethan's heart racing. The receptionist had told him James wanted to see him, and Ethan tried to remain calm as he walked down the sleek hallway to the executive offices. His mind raced with possibilities. What could James want to talk to him about? Was this about his internship performance? Was there something he had done wrong? He had worked hard, but what if it wasn't enough? When he reached the office door, he knocked and heard James's deep voice invite him in. As Ethan stepped inside, James was sitting behind his large mahogany desk, looking every bit the successful entrepreneur he had come to know. "Ah, Ethan, come in. Sit down," James said, his voice warm but firm. Ethan took a seat across from him, trying to mask the nervous energy thrumming through his veins. James leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled thoughtfully as he studied Ethan for a moment. There was a weight to the silence, and for a moment, Ethan wondered if he was about to be told his internship was ending. "You've been doing excellent work," James began. "Your progress has been impressive, and I've noticed that you're not just learning the ropes. You're beginning to take on more responsibility without being asked. That's rare, especially at your age." Ethan swallowed, the nervousness still lingering in his chest. "Thank you, sir. I'm just doing my best." James smiled, a slight twinkle in his eyes. "That's what I like to hear. You've got a strong work ethic, Ethan, and you've got potential, a lot of it. That's why I'm offering you something a little unexpected." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had expected a compliment, maybe even a recommendation for future opportunities. But this was different. He had no idea where this conversation was headed. "I've been thinking about your future here at the company. You've earned my trust and respect, and I want to offer you more than just an internship. I'd like to offer you a paid position," James said, his gaze steady and confident. The words didn't immediately register. Ethan blinked, his mind racing to catch up. A paid position? That wasn't something he had expected. This wasn't just an offer of a job. It was an opportunity to take his place in a company that, just a few months ago, had seemed completely out of reach. "Wait, are you saying you want me to stay on full-time?" Ethan asked, his voice barely above a whisper, as if he were afraid the moment might slip away. James nodded. "Exactly. I've seen how hard you've worked, and I believe in what you can bring to the table. Of course, you'd start at an entry-level position, but it's a step forward. You'd be given more responsibility, more opportunities to grow. And if you continue to impress me, I can offer you even more in the future. This is just the beginning, Ethan. Ethan sat there, stunned. He had gone from being a lifeguard at a community pool to interning at one of the most successful companies in Miami. And now, James was offering him a chance to stay, to build a real future. It felt like a dream, but it was real. He could see it in James's eyes. "I thank you, Mr. Carter. I don't even know what to say. This is everything I've worked for," Ethan said, his voice full of emotion. James smiled. "You've earned it, Ethan. But remember, this is just the start. Keep your head down, stay humble, and always push yourself to learn. I don't expect perfection, but I do expect growth." Ethan nodded eagerly, his mind still spinning. A paid position. He was no longer just an intern. He was a part of something bigger, and that meant everything to him. "You'll start in 2 weeks," James continued. "By then, I expect you to be familiar with all the tools you'll need to succeed in this new role. You'll also be working closely with some of our senior staff members. They'll help guide you as you transition into your new responsibilities." Ethan felt a surge of pride. This wasn't just a job. It was a career, a path to something greater than he had ever imagined. And it wasn't just for him. It was for his mother, too. She had worked so hard for him to have this opportunity, and now it was his turn to make the most of it. As Ethan stood to leave James's office, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had been given a chance that so many others could only dream of, and he wasn't about to squander it. "Thank you again, Mr. Carter. I won't let you down," Ethan said, his voice filled with resolve. James gave him a nod of approval. "I know you won't, Ethan. Go and show them what you're made of." As Ethan walked out of the office, a rush of emotion flooded through him. He had come so far in such a short time, but this was just the beginning. He had a job now, a real job, and with it came responsibility to prove that he deserved to be there. But Ethan was ready. This was his chance to build a future, not just for himself, but for his mother too. And he wasn't about to let it slip away. That evening, as Ethan called his mother to share the news, he could hear the joy in her voice, even before he had finished telling her. "You did it, Ethan. I knew you could. I'm so proud of you, honey." Ethan smiled, his heart swelling with pride. "We did it, Mom. This is just the beginning. You've helped me get here, and now I'm going to make sure we both get to the top." The conversation ended with words of love and excitement, and as Ethan sat back in his chair, he realized that everything he had worked for was finally coming to fruition. It wasn't just the offer from James, it was the promise of a better life. The promise of a future that had seemed impossible just a few short months ago. And now, with a paid position at the company, the future was finally within reach. The world was wide open, and Ethan was ready to conquer it. Ethan's new role at James Carter's company was nothing like the days spent lifeguarding at the community pool. It was a far cry from the relaxed, sun-drenched hours spent keeping watch over swimmers. The world of business was sharp, fast-paced, and filled with expectations. Yet, with each passing day, Ethan became more comfortable. The nerves that had plagued him at the start began to ebb away as he settled into the rhythm of his new life. His first week in his full-time position was a whirlwind. He was given more responsibility than he had ever expected, attending meetings, drafting reports, and even speaking with clients on behalf of his team. His tasks were challenging, but they were also opportunities for growth, and Ethan was nothing if not determined to make the most of them. One of the most intimidating parts of the job was learning to speak the language of business. The jargon, the buzzwords, and the nuanced conversations between senior staff were enough to make anyone feel like an outsider. Ethan had never been around so many people who had achieved such high levels of success. He wasn't sure where he fit into the picture, an inexperienced teenager, fresh out of high school, with no formal education in business. But James had believed in him. That belief kept Ethan going, even when self-doubt crept in. On the second day of his new role, Ethan was asked to sit in on a strategy meeting with James and some of the senior management team. As the meeting unfolded, the conversation flowed effortlessly from one topic to the next. They discussed new market opportunities, upcoming mergers, and financial forecasts. Ethan sat quietly at the edge of the table, absorbing everything like a sponge. He barely understood half of what was being said, but he could tell that each word mattered, that each decision had consequences that rippled throughout the company. He listened closely, trying to soak up as much knowledge as he could. At one point, James turned to him with a smile. "Ethan, what do you think?" Ethan froze, caught off guard. About what exactly?" he stammered. James chuckled, sensing his discomfort. "Don't worry, you're not expected to have all the answers right away. But from what you've seen so far, any thoughts on the direction we're heading?" Ethan's heart raced. The last thing he wanted to do was speak out of turn. But he couldn't just remain silent. This was his chance to contribute, to prove he wasn't just an intern anymore. "Well," Ethan began, feeling his confidence build as he spoke, "from what I understand, it looks like the market is shifting toward more tech-driven solutions. Maybe we could explore partnerships with some of the emerging companies in the sector. They could bring fresh perspectives and ideas." James raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "That's an interesting take. We've been looking at some tech-driven opportunities, but I haven't heard that specific suggestion before. You've got a good eye." Ethan couldn't believe what he had just heard. James Carter, one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the city, had acknowledged his input. It was a small moment, but it meant the world to Ethan. His idea might not have been revolutionary, but it was a step in the right direction. And that was enough for now. As the days passed, Ethan continued to rise to the challenge. He started contributing more actively in meetings, asking thoughtful questions, and offering his insights when appropriate. Slowly, he was building credibility with the senior staff. They began to see him not just as a teenager, but as someone with potential, someone who could become an integral part of the company in the future. James was impressed by how quickly Ethan had adapted to the fast-paced environment. He would occasionally pull him aside after meetings to offer encouragement or constructive feedback. "You're doing great, Ethan," James would say. "Keep pushing yourself. And remember that mistakes are just stepping stones to success. Don't be afraid to make them." But despite the praise, Ethan never allowed himself to become complacent. Every morning, he woke up earlier, worked harder, and sought out opportunities to learn. He spent his evenings reading up on business trends, watching interviews with successful entrepreneurs, and practicing his public speaking. He knew that the only way to succeed in this world was to constantly improve. One of the most valuable lessons he learned from James was the importance of resilience. There were days when things didn't go according to plan. Clients canceled meetings, reports got delayed, and new challenges popped up out of nowhere. But James never panicked. Instead, he faced every problem with a calm determination, always looking for a solution rather than dwelling on the issue. "You can't control everything," James had told him once, "but you can control how you respond to it. Don't waste energy on things you can't change. Focus on what's in front of you and keep moving forward." Ethan took that advice to heart. It became his mantra: keep moving forward. Even when the pressure seemed unbearable, he reminded himself that every obstacle was an opportunity to grow stronger. By the end of his first month in his full-time role, Ethan had become an integral part of the team. He wasn't just the new kid anymore. He was a valued contributor, someone who could be relied upon to deliver results. And with every success, his confidence grew. One afternoon, after a particularly challenging presentation to a potential client, James called Ethan into his office. As Ethan walked in, he noticed that James was standing by the window looking out over the city. "Ethan," James began without turning around, "you've done well in the past month. Your hard work hasn't gone unnoticed." Ethan, feeling a bit nervous, shifted on his feet. "Thank you, sir. I've been doing my best." James turned to face him, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You've done more than just your best. You've gone above and beyond, and that's what I like to see. The way you handled that presentation today, showing confidence, answering questions on the spot, was impressive. I'm proud of how far you've come." Ethan's heart swelled with pride, but he kept his composure. "I'm just getting started, sir. I still have a lot to learn." James smiled, stepping forward. "I'm glad to hear that, but I'm also thinking ahead. Ethan, I want to start you on a new project, one that will challenge you even more. It's a big step, but I have no doubt you'll be ready." Ethan's pulse quickened. "What kind of project?" James leaned forward, his eyes locking with Ethan's. "I want you to lead a small team to develop a new marketing strategy for one of our upcoming product launches. You'll be working closely with our senior marketing director. It's a big responsibility, but I know you're capable." Ethan was stunned. This was the kind of opportunity he had dreamed of since he started the internship. Leading a project? A team? He had never imagined he'd be given such a significant role so soon. But in that moment, he realized how far he had come. All the late nights, all the sacrifices had brought him to this point. And now it was time to take the next step. "Thank you, Mr. Carter," Ethan said, his voice filled with determination. "I won't let you down." James's smile widened. "I know you won't, Ethan. I'm excited to see what you'll do." As Ethan left James's office, his mind raced. A new project, leading a team. This was the moment he had been working for, the moment he had been building toward since the day he dove into the pool to save Ava. He had come a long way from that day, and now the future was wide open. But one thing was clear. Ethan wasn't about to stop now. He had proven to himself that he belonged here, and he was ready to rise even higher. This was just the beginning. The weeks after James's offer to lead the new marketing project were a blur of activity and excitement. Ethan's role shifted significantly, and he found himself managing a team, brainstorming ideas, and collaborating with senior staff in ways he never thought possible. The project was massive. It was the launch of a new product that had the potential to change the trajectory of the company, and James had entrusted him with its success. It wasn't just about business anymore. It was personal. Ethan knew he had to give it everything he had. Leading the team wasn't easy. There were moments of tension, moments where deadlines loomed large and tempers flared. But Ethan kept his calm, taking to heart the lessons James had taught him about staying focused under pressure. He wasn't just the intern anymore. He was a leader, and his decisions affected not just his team, but the future of the company itself. Every day, he felt himself growing. When obstacles arose, he faced them head-on, leaning on the support of his team and the experience of his colleagues. They taught him things he hadn't known, how to navigate difficult conversations, how to inspire others, how to think big without losing sight of the details. Each small victory felt like a huge achievement, and with every success, Ethan gained more confidence in his abilities. One afternoon, a few weeks into the project, James stopped by the office where Ethan and his team were working. The room was buzzing with activity, people on calls, laptops open, papers scattered across the table. When James walked in, the room immediately quieted. "Good to see you all hard at work," James said, his voice commanding yet warm. He turned to Ethan. "How's it going?" Ethan stood up, his nerves still present despite his growing confidence. "It's going well, sir. We've hit a few bumps along the way, but we're on track. I'm confident we'll be ready for the launch." James nodded approvingly. "I have no doubt. You've got a solid team behind you, and you're guiding them well. Just remember, Ethan, this is more than just about getting things done. It's about the vision, about where you want this company to go. Keep thinking big." Ethan took a deep breath, grateful for James's trust. "I won't forget that. I'm trying to keep the bigger picture in mind." James smiled, a rare look of pride crossing his face. "Good. Keep it up, and you'll go far." The words stayed with Ethan long after James left the room. This was the moment he had worked so hard for. He wasn't just working for a paycheck anymore. He was working to build something, to contribute to the company's legacy. And he wasn't going to let anything stand in his way. As the days wore on, the project began to take shape. Ethan's leadership became more apparent. He helped his team navigate through setbacks, whether it was a marketing strategy that wasn't resonating or a product delay. Ethan's ability to adapt, to pivot when necessary, and to keep his team motivated through every challenge was becoming his trademark. But there were still moments of doubt. Late one evening, as Ethan sat at his desk reviewing the final drafts of the marketing materials, he found himself staring at the screen, questioning everything. Was he really ready for this? Could he truly lead this team to success? He wasn't sure he was cut out for this level of responsibility. The pressure was immense. That night, he received a call from his mom. Her voice was as soothing as always, a constant reminder of why he was doing all of this. "Hey, honey, "How's it going?" she asked, sensing something in his tone. Ethan leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. "It's going. But honestly, I'm a little overwhelmed. There's so much at stake, and I'm not sure if I'm doing enough. What if I mess this up? What if I fail?" His mother's voice was calm but firm. "Ethan, I know you're doing your best, and that's all anyone can ask of you. You've come so far. Look at everything you've already accomplished. You've learned more in the past few months than most people do in years. This project, it's just another step. You're going to do great because you've always risen to the occasion." Ethan swallowed the lump in his throat, feeling the weight of her words. "Thanks, Mom. I needed to hear that. I believe in you, Ethan. Always have, always will," she replied. The conversation gave Ethan the clarity he needed. His mom was right. He had come so far, and he had already proved he could handle challenges that once seemed insurmountable. This project wasn't the end. It was just another chapter in his journey. He couldn't let fear stand in his way. With renewed determination, Ethan threw himself back into the work, fine-tuning the marketing plan, overseeing the final preparations for the launch. The project had grown larger than he had ever imagined, but Ethan was no longer intimidated. He was ready. The day of the product launch finally arrived, and Ethan stood in the conference room alongside James and the rest of the senior team. The room buzzed with energy as everyone prepared for the big presentation. Ethan, though nervous, couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. His hard work had brought him here. When it was time for Ethan to present the marketing strategy to the board, he walked confidently to the front of the room. He knew this moment was a culmination of everything he had worked for. As he spoke, his voice steady and clear, he could feel the weight of the room's attention on him. His vision, his ideas, were being heard. When he finished, there was a long silence before James spoke. "Excellent job, Ethan. I'm impressed. This is exactly the kind of forward thinking we need." Ethan felt a rush of relief and pride. This was the moment when everything came full circle. He had started as a teenager working as a lifeguard at a community pool, unsure of his future, unsure of his worth. And now, he was leading a successful marketing project for one of the city's most prominent companies. The launch was a resounding success. The product took off in the market, and the campaign Ethan had led was hailed as innovative and effective. The entire team, including James, praised Ethan for his leadership and vision. But for Ethan, the true reward came later that evening. As he walked out of the office, tired but content, he looked up the stars, reflecting on how far he had come. His journey had been long, but each step had brought him closer to this moment, the moment when he knew he had made it. And in his heart, he knew that this was just the beginning. Later that night, as Ethan sat at home with his mom, they celebrated together. "You did it, Ethan. You led that project like a pro," his mom said, her eyes shining with pride. Ethan smiled, a deep sense of gratitude filling him. "We did it, Mom. We made it. All of this. This is for us." The future stretched out before them, full of possibilities. And Ethan knew that no matter what came next, he was ready. Because he had built this future himself, step by step. The days following the product launch were a whirlwind of congratulations, celebrations, and new opportunities. Ethan had truly earned his place at James Carter's company, and with it, his own future seemed limitless. But while his professional life soared, his personal life had taken a turn for the better as well. He had a chance to look back and appreciate how far he and his mother had come from those tough days in their small, cramped apartment. One evening, as Ethan sat with his mom in their apartment, which was now a little brighter and more comfortable, they both smiled as they reflected on the past few years. The sacrifices, the struggles, the moments of doubt, they had led them to this point. They were no longer just surviving, they were thriving. It was then that Ethan received a phone call that would cement the change in their lives forever. It was from James Carter. "Ethan, I want to invite you and your mom to Ava's birthday party this weekend. It's going to be at our house, and I'd love for you both to be there. You're not just my employee anymore, you're family," James said, his voice warm and welcoming. Ethan felt a wave of emotion rush over him. Family. The word carried so much weight, and hearing it from James, someone who had believed in him and mentored him, felt like the ultimate recognition. "Of course, Mr. Carter. James?" Ethan corrected himself with a smile. We'd love to come. The day of Ava's 5th birthday arrived, and it was nothing like the small family gatherings Ethan had grown up with. James's home was grand, with sprawling gardens, a sparkling pool, and a lavish interior that felt like something out of a magazine. But despite the luxury, it was clear that the heart of the home was something far more meaningful. A genuine love for family, friends, and the people who mattered most. As Ethan and Laura arrived at the party, they were greeted warmly by James and his wife, Claire. Ava, in her colorful birthday dress, ran up to Ethan with open arms, hugging him tightly. "You're my hero, Ethan," she exclaimed, her bright eyes full of admiration. Ethan chuckled, bending down to her level. "You're too kind, Ava. You're the real hero for making it to 5 years old." The room erupted with laughter, and James gave Ethan a knowing look from across the room. It was a look of pride, a look that spoke volumes about how far Ethan had come, not just as a professional, but as a person. James had seen something in Ethan from the very beginning. He had seen his work ethic, his integrity, and his heart. And now, as he watched Ethan interact with his daughter, he understood just how far that heart would take him. Throughout the party, Ethan and Laura felt a sense of belonging they had never experienced before. The people at the party, many of whom were successful entrepreneurs and high-powered professionals, treated them with kindness and respect. Ethan had always been the outsider, the kid from a struggling family, but now he was on equal footing with people who had once seemed unreachable. His success had opened doors, but it was his character that had kept them open. As the party wound down, James pulled Ethan aside. The two stood on the balcony overlooking the garden, the sound of laughter and music floating in the background. "I just wanted to take a moment to thank you, Ethan," James began, his tone sincere. "You saved my daughter's life. But more than that, you've shown me what real character looks like. You've worked harder than anyone I know, and you've built something incredible for yourself and your mom. It's been an honor watching you grow." Ethan felt a lump form in his throat. He had never imagined that a simple act of bravery could lead him to a moment like this. "Thank you, James. I don't know if I've ever told you this, but I'm grateful for everything you've done for me, for giving me a chance when I didn't deserve it. You've changed my life," Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. James smiled and placed a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You earned it, Ethan, and I'm proud of everything you've accomplished. But this is just the beginning. You've got so much potential, and I have no doubt you'll go even further." Ethan looked out over the garden, the weight of James's words settling deep within him. He had already come so far, yet it felt like the path ahead was still wide open, filled with endless possibilities. He knew, without a doubt, that he was ready for whatever came next. He had already proven to himself that he could overcome any challenge, and now he had the confidence to reach even higher. Later, as the evening came to a close, Ethan and Laura said their goodbyes and headed back to their apartment. They didn't have a mansion or a sprawling garden, but as they walked through the door of their modest home, they both felt like they had everything they needed. "Mom," Ethan said as he sat beside her on the couch, "we've made it. We've come so far." Laura smiled, her eyes glistening with tears of pride. "Yes, we have. And it's all because of you, Ethan. You've worked so hard for this, and I'm so proud of you. You've changed our lives." Ethan smiled, his heart full. "We did it together, Mom. This is just the beginning." As they sat there, in their small but now warm and full of promise apartment, Ethan realized that the greatest gift wasn't the success, the job, or even the recognition. It was the bond they shared, the love they had, and the journey they had taken together. Everything else was just the icing on the cake. And with that, Ethan knew that no matter where his path took him from here, he would always remember the lesson that had gotten him this far. That small acts of kindness, perseverance, and love could create ripples of change that lasted a lifetime. The journey had come full circle. He had saved a life, but in doing so, he had changed his own. And now, with the support of those who truly mattered, Ethan was ready to continue making an impact, not just for himself, but for the people who had always been there for him. The future was bright, and Ethan was just getting started. The story of Ethan, the 16-year-old boy with a heart full of courage and ambition, has come to a close, but his journey is just beginning. From a young lifeguard at a bustling community pool, working tirelessly to provide a better life for his mother, to becoming a rising star at a successful company, Ethan proved that with relentless effort, bravery, and sacrifice, one can create profound changes, not just in their own life, but in the lives of others as well. This story is not only about a heroic rescue, but about how small acts, moments of choice, and acts of kindness can have a ripple effect, shaping destinies in ways we may never foresee. The relationship between Ethan and the Carter family, starting from an unexpected encounter to becoming a genuine friendship, demonstrates that sometimes in our hardest and most vulnerable moments, we discover the greatest opportunities. Ethan's life was transformed not only by the opportunities James Carter offered, but by the unwavering love and sacrifice of his mother. Together, they were no longer just two struggling souls in a vast city. They had become a family, embraced by new friends and a future filled with hope. Ethan realized that success is never easy, that every achievement comes with challenges, sweat, and sometimes fear. But he also understood that with persistence, hard work, and the support of others, anything is possible. The story of Ethan serves as a reminder that no matter where you start, no matter how tough life may seem, if you have the strength to persevere, the heart to help others, and the courage to learn, you will create change, not only for yourself, but for those around you. And so, Ethan's journey will never truly end. He will continue to rise, to learn, and to inspire others, making each step meaningful, and always remembering that the greatest changes often begin with the smallest actions. Thank you so much for following Ethan's story from the very beginning until the end. Your time and attention mean the world, and I hope this journey has inspired you as much as it has inspired me to share. Ethan's story is a reminder that no matter where we start, with determination, kindness, and the courage to act, we can change not only our lives, but the lives of others too. If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss out on future stories and videos. Your support helps bring these tales to life and keeps us going. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep the conversation going. Thank you again for watching, and I look forward to bringing you even more inspiring content soon.